Hello, Andrew.
Hey Mercy, how are ya?
Good. Nice to see you.
Yes, yeah, it's been a little while. Thanks for having
Yeah,
me on.
seriously. Oh my gosh, thanks so much for coming. Cool background.
Well, you might know this week is the Game Developers Conference, and so yeah, so that's pretty fun. And so yeah, we have a bunch of these AI generated background images, and so this one's a little bit like Indiana Jones meets Minecraft, maybe something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, very cool. What are you excited about seeing at GDC this year?
Yeah, well, we're doing a bunch of things. We did a big event yesterday that was, over 1,200 people actually, like a big kickoff
Wow.
event, which was great. For all the startups that are part of GDC, because as you know, GDC's primarily like kind of bigger companies,
Hmm.
and so this is kind of our way to bring together all the investors and the strategics that are working with startups and all the new teams. We also did we have a program that's called the Speed Run,
Hmm.
which is a accelerator, 12-week accelerator for folks working in games, and it's not just game studios, but it's also AI and tools and infrastructure. Anyway, so yesterday we had
Cool.
35 companies pitch in front of 400 investors. So that was kind of the end of our big program. And so
Wow.
that was just exciting, and big kind of emotional moment for everybody. And now folks are off to the races. So yeah, so it's been an exciting 24 hours for me.
Man, that's awesome. Games are such like a pure form of software and also of growth. I think I first learned really of a lot of the growth mindset from games. I remember
That's right.
watching videos of the Portal team. So Portal, fantastic game, and they were students at Carnegie Mellon, and they had built this prototype. I think maybe like some open source thing, and then they got acquired and ended up using by Steam and ended up using Half Life as the rendering engine, which is why Portal looks the way that it does. And they're the first people who taught me about really like user testing and just having people play through levels and
Yes.
not even really look at like seeing what they were doing in the level, but looking at their face and listening to the tone of their voice to understand, is this game fun? Like, are we getting the emotional reaction that we want? So interesting.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And if we were both in the Bay Area at this time, but the Facebook platform and Zynga, of course, also taught a lot of folks about viral growth
Exactly.
and all the referral, mechanisms and all the sort of, all the A/B testing and everything that folks were doing, which was also amazing. And I think my share goes to everybody, I believe, but like I put in my
Yeah, it looks
a
like it.
link with some photos, yeah, for some of our day yesterday, which is always fun.
That's very cool. Zynga reminds me that in that same era, so this would have been 10, 15 years ago of social games and really that big rise of Facebook and their platform. Another trend happening at that time is that a lot of types of games, like MapleStory, were coming over from primarily Korea, but also other parts of Asia. And I think like the
That's right.
Fortnite mechanism, right, of everyone grouping, dropping together and last man
That's right.
standing.
That's
Are
right.
you seeing any sort of like new game types getting picked up by Western game makers that you've been seeing in Asia for a while?
Yeah, well, I was going to say two things on that. I think one is you're totally right. And by the way, there's a funny joke about how everything in technology there's a software supply chain that starts in Asia, right? So it's like that's
Yeah.
where we got emojis. That's where we have live streaming.
Yep.
That's where we have yeah, esports. That was where we have all these
Mm-hmm.
all these interesting things.
Group
Obviously,
buying.
quite
Yeah.
quite exactly. That's right. Yeah, quite a bit in
Yeah.
gaming, of course. And so yeah, so that's quite exciting. And there was a period of time, exactly as you mentioned, where people sort of thought, oh, the way that you buy video games is you spend $60 per game, and
Yeah.
and why would you give it away for free? And so funny enough, this whole concept of like freemium really originated with like shareware in the 90s, kind of related to gaming. Then it kind of went away, and then it became huge in Asia. And then you're right, and then it kind of came through. So yeah, I mean, more recently, we've been spending a lot of time just thinking about how AI, and LLMs in particular, potentially add to or create kind of new genres within gaming. And I think one thing is, like, obviously LLMs are very oriented around text generation. And so if you think of it that way, then you kind of ask the question, what are all the various things that have a lot of text in them that might be then reinvented? So, one example, of course, is anything with narrative storytelling. Because narrative
RPGs.
storytelling, that's right, yeah, exactly. RPGs and like all the open world games, and you're interacting well with characters. The other big one I think that's super interesting, it's kind of a niche, but is like there's this whole category that has hundreds of games in it on Steam that are called dating simulators.
Oh yeah.
And and they're kind of like these story driven things, but it has like a romantic twist to it. There's games that are targeted at guys, games that are targeted at gals. But it's like, that is one end of a spectrum, with kind of AI companions on the other end. And the gamification of that category actually, I think, makes the games more fun, because you have to remember things and do things in order to like gain relationship points, and then and then
just like real
you
life,
can kind of like
actually.
progress. Yeah, exactly. That's, well, because it's funny, it's like when you talk to like a replica or something, the fact that they text you back so eagerly, like right away, is like, that's not like real life. Real life, you have to, you might get ghosted, you might get ignored for hours and hours, and it might take quite a while in order for things to work. So yeah, that's part of the fun.
Yeah. Hi, Jamie. That was funny. That's our friend Jamie from the backstage popping up.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like the digital version of the black hand that comes and grabs something.
Yeah, exactly.
Off the stage.
Exactly. Yeah. And games, it's funny. Games, and we should say games and porn, have driven the sphere of technology forward in a lot of ways. And increasingly, it seems like games are doing that. And obviously, the AI, the visual generation, and the language generation is so interesting for particular types of games. Is there other technology that you're really excited about, that you're starting to see pop up in games and hoping becomes more mainstream?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, because as you mentioned, adult entertainment online is also the source for cost per click, right? The entire cost per click advertising model, and the affiliate model and all that. There were many very successful streaming video services that existed before Twitch, that were kind of in the adult space.
Exactly.
And but and a bunch of other examples we can talk about. But I think that is one of the reasons why the A16Z Games Fund has been was established. Was we sort of think of gaming as kind of the source of many of the new technologies that become important. And so first, importantly, literally computing in the home, right? Was the first chips were brought because of all the video game consoles, and the Commodore and the Atari and all those. GPUs, I mean, it's so funny now that GPUs are such a huge thing in AI, that we wouldn't have them if people didn't build them for games. And actually, if you go back to the original, I think it's like the Star Fox, which is like a old 3D game, had actually an integrated CPU in the cartridge. And then we also got 3D engines came from John Carmack and his work on Doom and Quake and Wolfenstein 3D and all that. We had avatars, and then freemium, as we talked about, and there's many more. There's many more examples. And so AI is certainly an interesting area. Obviously, this is the year that Apple Vision Pros come out. I think it'll be small units this year, but I think there's a world where in the next year or two, things will really ramp, and then when they do ramp, that'll be a pretty interesting platform. But on Quest, actually, the stickiest, largest products are actually all sort of social gaming, products, multiplayer gaming products mostly for younger audiences, right? So, and then it's been rumored that there are some games, including games like Gorilla Tag on VR, that are actually doing 100 million of top line. And so,
Wow.
that's another kind of example. Web3 is another big thing everyone's talking about. Kind of every generation of Web3 has been driven by some underlying technology, and so it was store
Yeah.
value, and then it was ICOs, and then it was DeFi, and then it was NFTs. And one of the big things that people are talking about is, it seems as though the next generation of consumer adoption could be propelled by Web3 gaming, where all the virtual items that you grab while you're clearing these dungeons, or
Hmm.
playing with your friends, like every single one of them is actually unique, and it's an NFT, and it's tradable.
Hmm.
And so there's quite a
Like
lot of emerging
cross
technologies.
platform, or just like off platform. You don't have to go to the bazaar in World of Warcraft. You can do it on Twitch, or it's that you
That's
can bring that sword into Fortnite.
all of the above. I think the
Huh.
interoperability one will definitely be the hardest of all of them.
Yeah. Just from
Um,
the Polygon perspective, and
yeah, that's right.
balancing your game. Yeah. That'd be
Yeah,
very
yeah,
hard.
yeah. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, but I think there's the idea that's just literally just the items. There's so many games that have unique items, whether or not it's these kind of like dungeon crawler type games, or even in like extraction shooters, or even any like they could just be decorative items,
Yeah.
and make them tradable across all of these and I think the argument for why it's interesting from a business model perspective, and I think the business model perspective that drives the game genres, is that it is true that Web3 has convinced people, created the collective belief that you can buy a digital good and it should be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars USD, which is you
Hmm.
know much above and beyond anything that that they charge you, that
Yeah.
Activision will charge you, right? And so,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of that is because people feel like, oh, it's not just if something's like $10 and you expect that, like, yeah, you're going to play for a while and then you're going to stop and you're going to get rid of it. Okay, that's fine.
Hmm.
That's what it takes. But interestingly, these NFTs, of course, people, because they are non-fungible, people feel like, oh, I'm gonna trade them over time, and they're not meant to degrade, and you feel like a little bit of a stakeholder in the success of the game. And so anyway, there's various reasons why
Yeah.
why this could be the next wave. And so so that is part of the technology path that we're pretty excited about.
Huh. That's really cool. How did you folks at Andreessen Horowitz decide to have this kind of imprint of A16 games? Do you have different LPs or anything like that? Why a separate fund?
Yeah, um so the A16Z Games Fund is not the first kind of vertical fund. So we also have
Yeah.
a bio health vertical, we have a crypto vertical, and then and then we've launched like an American dynamism vertical as well, which is
Yeah.
focused on defense and government and security and a bunch of other things, and
Awesome.
education and a bunch of other pieces. And there's a couple of reasons to do it. The first one, frankly, is just for the founders, right? The first one is it is such an amazing magnetic kind of thing, to be able to just say, hey, we are the fund that we're going to be here for a long time. There's a dedicated
Yeah.
team, there's this and that, and it's really like starting with the customer and working backwards,
Yeah.
kind of within that, and being able to plant the flag and say, oh yeah, this is not a hobby for us, this is like the real thing, lets us
Yeah.
authentically participate in everything from conferences and investing, and when we talk to founders, that we can really do that. And then and then the thought is we can share a lot of the resources of the broader firm, which is almost 600 people, and so
Hmm.
it gives us the ability to add net new capabilities. So like we, for example, will go and hire like we have a talent team that can now hire game designers and 3D artists and people like that. I mean, that's we've never had to
Cool.
do that
Yeah.
at A16Z.
Yeah.
We have a creator partnerships person, Lester Chen, who ran partnership, ran gaming at YouTube, and so he has on speed
Wow.
dial all of the various most important gaming streamers and influencers, and like that's really important. Again, not
That's
something
huge.
that the firm previously needed, but at the same time, if we need to tap into, if we want to like ask questions about regulatory issues, there are shared teams that focus on government relations, and so we have a little mini team that works on that, and quite a big
Yeah.
political effort these days. And so, we can go talk to those people. So yeah, so it sort
Yeah.
of gives us, all of that. And then, and then LPs kind of, they get to decide, what they want. They can invest across all of A16Z, or they can pick and choose.
Oh, cool.
And the idea is to make it so that, they can kind of pursue their interests.
Yeah. Huh. That's really cool. Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, this, mention of like YouTube and TikTok reminds me, we've seen this huge, boost for streaming as a way for first gamers, well, not first gamers, but then gamers, to make a good living in front of a webcam. And it's really interesting, and that had been something that we brought over a long time ago. I think when I was a kid watching like StarCraft with my brother from South Korea. And then recently, Twitch shut down their South Korea arm. And now, a lot of streaming, like non-gaming streaming, is moving over to TikTok. And now the government, speaking of regulation, maybe they're going to ban TikTok or force a sale. And it has been such an incredible channel for people to acquire, fans and viewers. I'm curious, sort of from your pretty wide vantage point, what do you see happening just with streaming in general as a, acquisition channel in the next few years?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think, there's definitely, one way to think about how social media is bifurcating is there's sort of the text driven world, and then there's the like video driven world, right? Because I think what's
Yeah.
happened, and then within text, it's been interesting because, I'm on the board of Substack. And so we spend a lot of time, talking through and dissecting this. But, between Substack and X and, even like frankly, email and WhatsApp and, all of that, like that's kind of one, it's very terse. It's mostly with people that, you already know or know of.
Yeah.
And then video is interesting because, what's happened is this whole world of like podcasting, long form video, and then short form video, and then streaming has all kind of like turned into one thing, which is crazy, right? Because
Yeah.
now it's like, as we all see this now. It's like, if you're going to do a podcast, you don't do a podcast. What you do is you record in a YouTube studio, and you record for in a studio for YouTube, and then not only that, like maybe you'll stream that at the same time, and then you put the whole stream up on YouTube, and then you slice it into little pieces, and then you put it out as short form, and then on top of that, you also convert it to an audio channel, and then you publish that as a podcast. So I think what everyone's trying to do is they're trying to create this sort of create once, write anywhere type of publish anywhere kind of motion, so that you're not sitting around trying to build growth channels for every single new kind of thing. And so what's good about that is it's made it so that there are people who are writers, and there are people who are kind of video, audio, streamer type people, and those have kind of become two pretty distinct kind of content creation motions. And what that's done, I think, is it's allowed the emergence of the latter has sort of allowed for a lot of new techniques and ideas to occur over time, which is I think why we're starting to see the value of I have a couple of friends that now have invested a couple of years, and they now have like millions of followers on YouTube, and it's amazing. Like they have a very different experience than I do on X and blogging, but but they're also able to work those channels to promote their companies and to promote a lot of what they've been up to.
Yeah. What do you think is next? Because you guys are very much like living in a couple of years in the future. Just in sort of like consumer social internet, what are some of the sort of trends that you're predicting?
Yeah, well, we always love. I mean, the founders are always 12 months ahead of us, and then we get to hear about all their great ideas a little bit later, and then hopefully they become successful and break into the mainstream. So that's always the hope. I mean, I think like there's a couple, I think, big theories that are permeating everything that we're doing. We touched a little bit on AI, so maybe I'll go a little bit deeper on that. I think the core argument of AI and how it touches kind of consumer and gaming and everything else in between is the idea of what happens when all content creation costs go to zero, right? That's kind of the question, right? Because there was a period of time, and I was like thinking about it in the metaphor of like UGC, user generated content, because we went from a world where, like, if you talk to folks in Hollywood, they measure things in the thousands of dollars per minute. That's how they think about what they're doing. Obviously, like if you're making a film and it costs $200 million, which is quite often, and and then but the entire film is only 240 minutes, right? That's real expensive. It turns out, right? And so sorry, 120 minutes. Yeah, exactly. So it's like it's really expensive. And so I think what ends up happening is UGC then kind of disrupted that by saying, okay, well, what if you just kind of let a lot of people who are frankly time rich, maybe not money rich, able to create a lot of video? And what does that mean? Okay, so it means that there's now a lot of video, and there's actually, I think I was like if you look at the stats, I won't attempt to quote the number off the top of my head, but the stat of how many minutes of video are uploaded to YouTube per minute, right, is like an interesting ratio. And it's very, very high. And so, it kind of tells you, what's happening there. Now, UGC, of course, has been the most disruptive force in, over the last 20 years, for that reason. And by the way, like, people sort of thought originally, like, oh, well, this means that, okay, so sorry, I just pulled it up. So 500 hours of video were uploaded to YouTube every minute. Wild. Like, that's crazy. Right. So
wow.
So what ends up happening is, everyone maybe would have thought, oh, wow, YouTube, and TikTok and all these things, one day people are going to use UGC to create, something that competes with Hollywood. And in fact, that would have been totally the wrong way to think of it, because people didn't create 2-hour-long movies and TV shows and so on. They just created, 5-minute vlogs and dance videos and this and that. And it turns out that watching, like, I often think about it this way. It's like, would I rather watch 2 hours of, a movie, or would I rather watch, like, 1,000 TikTok videos? Because, like, that's what you're giving up. That's the opportunity cost. It turns out you can do both at the same time. You can watch while you're scrolling, which is become the dominant. Why choose? And so I think, going to AI, I think the same thing's going to happen, which is now it's sort of like, okay, well, instead of making content at the level of UGC, you can maybe make kind of like pro level content, or like quasi pro level content for free. And what are people going to do with it? And it's easy to say, oh, they're going to make movies, or oh, they're going to make TV shows, or oh, they're going to make vlogs and travel things, because that's what we can think kind of skeuomorphically right now. But I think it's, they're going to make something else entirely, and then, like, off we go. So I think that's one interesting aspect of just content cost going to zero, is I think that what I just described there, of AI allowing a new class of creators to create a new genre of content that didn't exist before, I think will play itself out in every modality. So we'll see this for music, we'll see this for podcasting and speech, we'll see this for books, we'll see this for movies, we'll see this for video games, we'll see this for every kind of modality you can imagine. And so I think that'll be very exciting. It'll be sort of the golden age of consumption, like for that. And then I think the other interesting part is that's kind of like, that's sort of the action that's happening, on the stage. And then behind the scenes, then you say, okay, well, what does it mean if, somebody who would have been able to create, one amazing 3D character per month can now do 10? What does it mean if a new level in a game would have taken 6 months, and then now it takes 1 day? What does it mean when you can, instead of thinking about Harry Potter, there was just an amazing Harry Potter video game, Hogwarts Legacy. that went from the books to kind of this open world experience. What if every book and every meme and every car commercial and everything would actually had an open world, had $1 billion open world like behind it? What would that mean,
Yeah.
right? And I think again that's a lot of what happens if we're able to make 3D art generation and level generation, character generation, and music and sound and video and everything, make the
Yeah.
cost go to zero. And of course, like a lot of folks are trying to figure out, is this going to be human in the loop? And as a result, it'll make humans more productive. And I can make the argument there. Or is it going to be something that is more like no code, where it allows a lot of people who are currently not able to have those skills, like myself. I've never designed a 3D character. Well, maybe I'm going to be able to, and maybe that means I'll be able to build a game kind of in a no code fashion.
Right.
And I think the argument that folks I say about kind of that humans are going to be in the loop is, if you look at software engineers over the last 30 years, they've gotten incredibly productive. They've gotten open source, they've gotten cloud computing, they've gotten all these amazing development environments, like all these amazing things have happened, and all those things have actually made the problem solving abilities of programmers even more general, making them even more effective in more problem sets, thus increasing the demands for software engineers. And I think there's an argument that like that same thing could play out in every job function, such that that there will be more and more demand for all of these different types of things. But yeah, we'll see. There's so that kind of general area I think is certainly really exciting, and we spend a lot of time thinking about that. A lot of the other things at the firm that we've been taking time on, as I mentioned, we have an American Dynamism Fund, and that is a lot to do with trying to figure out what are all the different ways that kind of the modern tech industry can support what's happening in society and government. We have the bio and health world, which is fund, which is there's so much happening there. From CRISPR to sort of highly affordable gene sequencing to just everything that's happening, and then crypto of course is very exciting. So that's kind of the I mean, at this point I think we cover most of what we'd like to cover at A16Z. There's maybe a couple categories here and there that don't fit with what we do, but in general we seem to be pretty plugged into what founders are excited about these days.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so funny because at the end, a lot of it ends up blending together. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but everyone in the games industry knows that our military has been successfully using 3D video games to train drone pilots, to run scenarios. And it seems like it's really helped people. And I know certainly in our generation of people who grew up, playing like Duck Hunter when we were little kids, they'll have the experience where they go like skeet shooting for the first time in their life. And they're like, wow, I'm good at this. It's like, yeah, dude, Halo, Duck Hunt, those are real skills, as it turns out.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. No, and one of my coworkers is a former fighter pilot. And he was saying that the folks that are the best at flying drones are the video game folks. So exactly. He's confirmed that for me, that's real.
Nice. Yeah, I gotta dust off my Star Fox and do some barrel rolls. Those were the days. So before becoming VC, you were a founder, and you also ran rider growth at Uber during its super hyper growth period, and you're still connected to the community. You're a co-founder of Reforge, is that right?
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Brian and I started it many years ago.
Yeah, when it was just like you and Brian kind of having some meetups with people and some short talks and things like that. And now it's, man, I send everyone there for, just some, hey, what do I want? I'm like, here, just go to Reforge. Like, this is what you want. And so it's so cool. You've had this, bird's eye view of the ramp up through the bubble of the ZERP era of growth at any cost, because we have all of this basically like free money. And now, as we're all experiencing this pretty uncomfortable contraction, a lot of go-to-market teams seeing layoffs, and then the rest of the U.S. economy seems to be recovering a little bit better than tech and groceries. It seems like.
Yes, right.
I'm so curious. Like, are the shapes of the growth teams that the companies that you're on the board of, or the companies that you're just seeing in the ecosystem? Are growth teams getting started at different stages? Do they look different than they did even 18 months ago?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's been very interesting to see how it's evolved, and there's a couple takeaways I would give on this. So first, maybe to just zoom out a little bit. I mean, it's sort of, there's a fundamental question of like, why do growth teams even exist? What was their purpose, right? And I think their purpose was, you had a period of time where all the product leaders were sort of very designery UX kind of product leaders, or they were sort of like a little bit more engineering oriented, because especially early in the technology cycle, the most important thing was just being able to get it built at all was sort of the big thing. And so I think a lot of founders started to see, and this certainly originated at LinkedIn and at Facebook and some of these other places, where you'd have this cognitive dissonance where you go to a board meeting, and every single one of your board meetings was about these business metrics. You talk about average revenue per user, and what were your retention rates, and how are you growing, and what does monthly active users look like, and you'd spend all your time talking about that with your investors, because that's what they care about. And then you turn around and go back into your product building cycle, and all of a sudden nobody used those terms at all, right? And instead they were just talking about, hey, on this date, what features do we ship on these dates, and so on. And I think it and this would have been kind of in the like 2010 period. I think you saw some really amazing teams figure out like, okay, well, maybe what we need to do is just have a product group that whether it's separate or reports into product, there's a lot of configurations, go and let's get kind of let's get some businessy kind of like technical people who can kind of act as PMs to sort of drive that. And so I think, that is what ultimately created this whole construct of the growth teams. Now, I think a couple funny things have happened over the years, right? I think one is, I don't think you can be a PM these days without understanding what retention is and what, CAC and LTV are, or any of those things. I think it's turned out that as technology, let's barring this AI movement, maybe we can address that separately, but like barring that, the world of websites and mobile apps and everything has gotten easier and easier to build. And because the technology piece of it has become more trivial, really like companies are not failing because of technical risk, right? They're failing because of market risk. And so because they're failing because of market risk, it means that if you're going to be a great, product-led PM, so that's, bottoms up SaaS and consumer products and, gaming and things like that, you need to be conversant in all the things that a growth team is conversant in. And so in many ways, the first observation I'll make is like, is maybe like growth, like the growth team, the growth like methodology won. It's become dominant, and because it's become dominant, it's almost become folded into broader product management strategy overall, right? That's maybe the first thing I would say, and maybe the second thing is that has a lot to do with the where you are on the S curve of the technology, which is why, going to AI for a second, which is why right now, if you're one of the companies building a foundational model, you don't have to know about any of this stuff, because like you put out something, it goes on Twitter, like it's amazing, everybody tries it. That's kind of like the quote unquote it works feature is like all you need. You don't need like fancy like viral loops or anything in your product. Now, that's good. It's going to be needed one day. Is it 2 years from now? Is it 5 years from now? Who knows? But like I think we're going to go there over time. So that's one thing I'll say. The next thing I'll say on this is the way that growth teams evolved is, I think there was so much heat and sexiness around growth as sort of user growth and growth as a methodology that the marketing teams rebranded into growth. And so I started to see all these titles, this is a couple of years ago, where everybody was a growth marketer. I was like,
Hmm.
what does it mean to be a growth marketer? Like, that's
Yeah.
like, isn't that just like, isn't that just saying like marketing?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that the same thing as opposed to what, and what I realized was what it was the, again, going back like 20, 30 years ago, marketing was really brand marketing. And it was
Yeah.
really, the folks that were participating in internet kind of .com era were often consumer brand marketers that were learning how to market on the internet. And it turned out that like it didn't work that well. And instead, everybody wanted to talk about, conversion funnels and A/B testing and landing pages and all that stuff. And so because of that, this whole world of like what I would have called early in my career like performance marketing was
Yeah.
rebranded to growth marketing, and then kind of like merged in with all the various kind of like growth teams. So like a really highly capable a CEO sponsored growth team, as the type that we had at Uber, actually had both the performance marketing teams called growth marketers sitting side by side with engineers that were on the growth team sitting alongside data scientists and PMs that were also on the growth team. And so they could kind of like do anything, because you could build, the
Yeah.
kind of campaign that the kind of thing that a team like that can pull off is to basically say, okay, well, we're going to do a thing where we're going to run a whole set of campaigns that show sign up bonuses from $10 to $50. And depending on
Hmm.
which creative that you click on, we're going to restyle the landing page and give you a different funnel experience all the way down to, the emails that you get as you're signing up based on
Hmm.
the creative that you clicked on. And that's a kind of integration that most teams cannot pull off because they're so distinct from each other. And so to the
Yeah.
extent that it's all been folded in, that's kind of allowed for that. But I think what's probably happened more realistically is that a bunch of teams have kind of rebranded to growth, and it's sort of this cohesive business unit concept has become
Hmm.
only popular at a few places. And
Yeah.
this is now more, the growth team is much more like sort of like a sub team that reports into the VP of product. That's typically how it's done, these days compared to before.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I've been seeing a good number of salespeople with the title head of growth.
Right. Yeah. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think even like Coca-Cola had like a chief growth officer at one point, which I was like, wow, that's crazy how far that word has
Yeah.
taken, has gone, for that reason. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I've seen that as well. Yeah, exactly. And so it sort of has been watered down a little bit. And so I still think that probably, the current torchbearers, if there are one, have actually rebranded to yet another acronym. I think it's like PLG is probably the closest to
Yeah.
kind of like classic like growth, which is this integration
Yeah.
between business minded thinking and like product roadmaps. I think to me
Yeah.
that's kind of like where the torchbearers live right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And it really, like, that specific thing works incredibly well for certain types of business models. And then for the rest of it, actually, like, that is all you want is, a steady
Yeah,
inflow, top of funnel performance marketing or
that's right.
your
That's right. Yeah, and
sales
sometimes
team.
if you're like a big enterprise sales team, sometimes these big enterprise folks will ask me, oh, how do I apply all the things from your book, right? And I'll
Yeah,
be like,
exactly.
I don't know. I'm like, unless you're interested in PLG and unless you're interested in all these things, like it seems like you should just sell more stuff, like that's probably the right way to think of it. And so, but luckily, I mean, a lot of people obviously are thinking a lot about PLG and are thinking a lot about consumer. And then maybe one last point I'll make about consumer. I think the thing that's most interesting about consumer is that we are kind of at the tail end of this S curve
Mhm.
within mobile. We've had mobile for 15 years now. And so because of that, it's been a little bit tricky, just because you always have to ask the question, well, if we've had this for 15 years, any cool idea that you have, why hasn't it been tried and why does it still work, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And so, and there are things, as we were just talking about with video, or, I think a lot of the quote unquote creator economy was really about sort of a creator led GTM for products.
Right.
um, and with the idea that creators are like kind of a new construct. And so I think you always have to look at these new constructs and figure out like, what's the next big channel for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, where's the place that everyone is coming together? Okay, folks, we're ready for live Q&A. Seems like no one's posted any questions yet. Don't be shy. Rahul has a question. Do you see that, Andrew?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. What the next stage of growth looks like.
Yes. Yeah, what is the next stage? I think you always have to look at the, I think because I'm thinking a lot about kind of the end of this S curve and what are the things that kind of take you into the next S curve. I think you have to look at all the emerging technologies, and I wrote this thing a long time ago. It is in my book, which is kind of this idea of the law of shitty click-throughs, and the argument there is that basically marketers are at this in this forever war with other marketers.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because consumers get when the first time they see something and there's a novelty effect, the response rate is very, very high. And so for some of us who experienced getting our first email invites, oh, Mercy's invited you to this thing, that was like, whoa, that's like a big, because you're literally, the mental conception was like, I'm getting access to this exclusive club that Mercy is is sending me. And so the response rates were incredibly high. And then now, of course, this goes straight to spam. Like, nobody cares, right? Actually, there's a funny comic where it's like, it used to be, you get all this mail and you'd be like, oh, it's just junk mail. And then you check your computer and be like, you've got mail. And you're like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And that's like before. And then today, it's like, you get all this mail and you're like, more email. And then you go to your mailbox and someone wrote you a letter. And you're like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. And just the reversal of all that. So so we're always, the marketers are always at war with each other. So because they're always at war with each other, the question is, well, given that everybody's copying everybody else, what are the new things that people are doing? This is why all the PMs that are thinking about growth strategy and all the marketers still have jobs, is because everybody copies each other. So you have to do new things. And so the question is, well, what's new, right? And I think, so I think what you do is you start to think about, okay, well, what are all the emerging technologies and how do you apply them into your discipline? And so, for instance, there's been, if you guys have been following what's been happening with Web3, there's been an incredible amount of innovation over there, over the last couple of years. The concept of tokens being something that might have value, and so then you airdrop them to like a ton of people, and that's basically pointing back to you, like, that's super interesting. The whole concept of whether it's NFTs or fungible tokens, creating community buy-in for product before it's launched, it's almost kind of like a built-in, almost like Kickstarter kind of concept. Like, that's like super interesting. So you could look in that direction. For AI, I have this whole theory that marketing in the future is going to look a lot more like sales. And the reason for that is because why does marketing exist? Well, marketing exists because one day somebody decided to hang up a sign that says, come buy stuff at my store. And you're kind of like, well, why didn't they just stand under the sign and just talk to everybody that, like walked by the sign? And the reason, of course, is because, it's too labor intensive, right? But like in the digital world, what if instead of buying banner ads, instead there was like a free live assistant who was fully, AGI'd up and knew everything about your product, was available 24/7. And they would sell to you instead of marketing to you. And instead of thinking of it like, oh, I'm going to run a campaign for 1 million people with my marketing campaign, instead the idea would be, I'm going to sell one-on-one with 1 million people. And I'm going to use my LLM that understands my product to do so. And I think that might work. Like, and you
Yeah.
can build arbitrarily large sales teams that way. And so, so there's like that kind of thing. There's like people talking about what's going to happen with, marketing messages that are just ultra personalized because,
Yeah. Insanely personalized. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. And like, you've never had, we've had kind of the idea of like, you can do a relationship sell, it's like, oh, someone's your friend. It takes a long time. You're talking to your wealth manager, and because you've worked with them for 5 years, when they have a new service, you're excited to try it out with them. Okay, great. That's a relationship sell. We don't really have the concept of a like banner ad relationship sell. Like that doesn't work, because you look at the banner ad for 0.3 seconds and you go right past it. But if this thing actually, if whatever product actually came in the form of a companion, and you actually talk to it, like if we're talking to ChatGPT all the time and ChatGPT starts recommending products to us, like that might work, right? And so that you might literally be able to do a relationship sell. So I think yeah, this blending of, there's this sort of idea that like AI allows you to take labor and sort of transmute it into compute, which is then obviously bought with capital. That's that sort of whole supply chain. Means that from a marketing standpoint, that might look much more like sales. So that's kind of like another theory, or you might talk about kind of, we might finally be able to do ultra personalized marketing. We may, like it's so annoying, like, a single marketer sitting around can't create literally a million taglines, but like an LLM can, and maybe an LLM can create the tagline based on what it knows about you, and maybe that's good. And then we can talk about VR, and we can talk about all the other emerging technologies and kind of cross it over to marketing. But I think, my advice to people that are working on growth is you kind of have to be at the cutting edge, and you kind of have to see what all the weird people are doing, because they're the people that are actually generating alpha in the whole equation. Otherwise, you're just competing with like hundreds of thousands of other marketers trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, man. And by the time you get to that channel and your, to use an old example, your Facebook game, post on the wall is like, oh, help Mercy, she's trying to build a cat. People have like blindness to that. Now it's like, if you want to get in on a new channel, actually you need to find that channel.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And I think that like by the time that something's a case study, you should turn your, it turns out that if you turn your buttons orange, conversion goes up. By the time that there's a case study from somebody about this, realistically, the arbitrage is closed.
Yes, exactly.
No longer a thing.
Exactly. Yeah. How many growth metrics are too many for a team?
That's a great question. Yeah. So I recommend typically, thinking about your metrics in kind of two different ways. And by the way, I'm just going to quickly drop in a tweet storm I did a little while ago. That's just on AI and marketing. Where I talk about some of these things, how AI will reinvent marketing. So I think the metrics are really there's actually two different sets of metrics I think that you actually need. In a larger group context, the reality is that a lot of what a growth team needs to do is it needs to evangelize a few kind of simple truths about your user behavior to align the rest of the company around those. And that's why, like, famously the Facebook 10 friends in 7 days kind of thing, you're like, well, why not 12 friends? Why not 7 friends in 3 days? Well, the thing is, it all works. The whole point is just that more friends,
it's easy to remember
at the beginning is shorter. And what that means is if everyone gets excited about that, then another team in some other part of the org that's thinking about their onboarding experience, or they're writing email notifications, they can be like, oh yeah, like we should think about how to support this overall goal. And so I think that you often have a set of kind of metrics that look like that. Those are also the metrics that go up to the board often, to just describe to people like what's going on with the company. And look, those are important. I think to really actually operate the business though, you end up needing a whole other set of things, which is a channel by channel breakdown of what's actually happening. And so realistically, what that means is you need a bird's eye view that tells you, hey, what is the channel mix for the entire product? How much are we getting through organic versus SEO versus this versus that? How is each one of those channels, working? If you're at a place that has the resources, you typically put a person in charge of every single one of the channels. And so, and then the top three or four channels are probably worth really investing in. And then there's a power law kind of off of that, right? So realistically, you might have somebody that's like, okay, you're going to be the PM of, SEO / Uber.com, right? The whole website, but also the growth aspect of it. And you're going to have a certain set of KPIs. And those KPIs are going to be, both increasing acquisition as well as conversion rate to whatever things that you care about. And you kind of do that for each channel that you are active in. And so whether that's referral or otherwise, I tend to ask people to track some kind of top line metric, like for example, if you're going to do impressions, if you're going to do a referral program, I always ask, like, how many impressions are you showing to the referral screen? And let's make sure that that's pretty good. And then, and a lot of times it's just buried in the app. So I'm like, all right, let's put it in the new user flow. Let's remind people like every, 10 sessions, let's put it, after the transaction flow, et cetera. So you're trying to maximize that. Then the second thing is you want some kind of like quality metric that gives you that these are not meaningless impressions. And that's some kind of conversion rate or something, because PMs, they love to game the metrics. So you're trying to supervise, what's happening. And then retention's important. I find that you typically don't really look at it because it's quite hard to change and it's quite hard for it to move around too much. So, you should have it. You should talk about what the D30 is. There should be a bunch of projects around D30. The reality is, like, when a metric doesn't move that much, people just stop paying attention to it, is what usually happens. And then finally, what I would say is then there's kind of some input metrics. So whether that's, if you're a social network, that's friending. If you're, a media product, then it might be like content uploads. If you're a marketplace company, it might be the number of transactions or the GMV. And you're looking for that. And then the final set of metrics I often think about is there's usually some strategic project of some new initiative you're trying to do. You're trying to add a new vertical to your marketplace. You're trying to grow in some new country where you don't have any users previously. And so you end up clustering a couple of metrics just to keep your eye on the new thing, to make sure that it's like healthy and moving along. And so then as a product lead in the company, you kind of are looking through each of these dashboards and trying to make them all kind of fit together. And it's very hard. And I would say that one other thing I generally tend to think is that you have to be really clear about what products are kind of in the 0 to 1 stage and what products are kind of in the scale stage. Because if you can't really cross-pollinate those two types of PMs. The 0 to 1 folks, like, they actually want more, they probably should have more qualitative insights. The product is much more about, like, qualitatively, like, does it give you that wow moment right up front? Is it really amazing? And then let's use all the metrics to optimize it. But oftentimes, especially in the last decade, we saw a lot of folks kind of try to A/B test their way into product market fit, and it just turns out it doesn't work very well. And I could expand a lot more on that, but I think that is that is a problem. And so because of that, it's much better to actually not have too many metrics for the 0 to 1 projects, as to not overwhelm the teams that are working on those.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad, well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming and spending this hour with us. This has been really great, especially because you have a whole busy week at the Game Developers Conference.
Yes, yeah, I'm excited. Thank you for having me. We'll have to do a proper catch up sometime soon.
Yes,
and excited about your new company and everything.